Time now for us to take a look at which were the best and which were the worst performing bourses on the continent last week. To take us through those numbers, I'm joined in studio by Gerhard le Roux, sales trader at Imara Africa Securities. Gerhard, I must tell you, this morning when I was doing a market update for the Dar es Salaam Stock Exchange, usually there's very little movement or none. Today it was 105% up. Why such big movements? And I know this was the best performing bourse last week, so shed some light.
Absolutely. So the Dar es Salaam Stock Exchange, probably from beginning of June, has really had a very strong revaluation. The news basically came, the market reacted due to news that the foreign exchange limits were going to be lifted by the Securities Authority. And there was huge speculation on when this was going to happen. We expected that it would happen on the 1st of August, and effectively it only happened at the end of the month, so basically last week, Wednesday. Yeah. So finally, the Dar es Salaam Stock Exchange now has no foreign ownership limits. Foreigners can own up to 100% of every counter that's out there.
So is this just short-term euphoria that we're seeing here, though?
To be honest with you, initially there's been a pretty strong revaluation from the locals, the local pension funds and fund managers, in expectations that the foreigners would actually move the market a bit further. And now that the foreigners have joined the party, absolutely, they've moved the market another 6% last week. So yeah, it's an exciting market. It's not as cheap as it was in June, as you can expect, but there's still some really interesting and worthwhile companies to look at, for sure.
What's also been interesting is the Kenyan banks. Very, very volatile. They've been, Equity Bank has done really well. Closed down last week, though, but you still would say it's a pretty good stock when you look at Kenyan banks?
Well, if you look at the performance for the year, it's been absolutely astonishing. It's been, it's moved up in the region of 90% and hit a high of 60 Kenyan shillings earlier, well, basically late September, and now it's drifted back to around about a 51. There's been a lot of investor speculation that they'd be able to capitalize on the near field cell phone operation that they've basically started. The regulators given them basically a year to roll that out and see from there if they will be allowed to get a permanent license. Investors have loved that news and basically moved the stock quite aggressively as a result. But it's a really good company. I'm a little hesitant to buy it at 51 though. Yeah,
a little bit hesitant. You know, what we've also noticed though is that the frontier markets don't usually move in tandem with what's happening in global markets. So in South Africa, for example, if something happens in the US and Europe, we will react, but not so much with the other markets. So what do you do as an investor? How do you make use of this information? How does one even make a decision when you're not really sure how to judge these markets?
I just think you need to take into account how difficult it is to trade for large institutionals in a lot of the markets. You would buy a position, keep it for a long term, 5 to 10 years, and really bank on the country and the company's performance for a long period of time. Those investors aren't skittish. They don't really care about what's happening in the global political or the global markets. They're really focused on what's happening on that specific country, where it's going for the next 10 years. And I think that's the reason why there's not that skittishness when it comes to the African markets.
So let's talk about, if you're a retail investor.
Yes.
Where can I find value? What should I be buying? Perhaps let's start with the east of the continent. Let's talk about the likes of Uganda, for example. What stocks there piques your interest?
Absolutely. So Uganda is quite an interesting market, a really strong growing market. And one of the areas where Uganda can really do well is in the energy sector, the demand for energy. And one share that is very geared towards basically the energy producer for Uganda is Umemi. So it's a stock that's moved quite nicely over the period of this year. But it's one that, if you look at the long-term prospects for Uganda, it's an excellent buy.